Welcome to Twin Talk Politics. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Twin Talk Politics. And today we are so lucky to be joined by the wonderful MLA Anderson, who is a member of Legislative Assembly for Nanaimo Lantzville. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for the invitation. Happy to be here.
Great. As a tradition, I would say it's a pretty cemented tradition on our podcast, is that our first question is always a 50-50 guessing challenge of who is Jason and who is Jerry, just based on our different colored backgrounds. And as I said, more than half of our guests get it wrong, so there's really no worry if you just make the incorrect guess.
Okay. I'm going to say Jason is the blue background.
Oh, unfortunately, that's wrong. No ways at all. I'm Jason, the one in the orange/yellow background, and that's Jerry, in the blue background. The more handsome one.
Okay.
No worries. That's up for debate. Great. Now that you can tell us apart, let's just dive straight into the episode. So Jerry and I know and well aware of all the incredible work you've done for British Columbia and Nanaimo as well. But for the listeners at home who might not be as familiar with who you are, we were wondering if you could please maybe just introduce yourself and maybe if you're up for it, throw in a fun fact as well.
Sure. My name is George Anderson. I'm the MLA for Nanaimo Lantzville. Going a bit into my history, I've had a long history of volunteerism. I was Junior Citizen of the Year when I was 16, participated in this program called Leadership BC, which was sponsored by the provincial government and Chamber of Commerce of British Columbia. And then something happened when I was 20 years old. I was elected to Nanaimo City Council, placing 29 votes from third place out of 27 candidates, beating out mayors and councillors, which was very humbling because usually when young people run, they come near last or they just squeak in. Was chair of transportation and helped pass a 25-year transportation master plan, got us to use things like social media to have an electronic town hall, which won us a national and provincial award. And I was the only member of my city council at the time who voted against a garbage incinerator that Vancouver wanted to have. Unfortunately, that never went ahead. And Vancouver's actually diverting more garbage and recycling than it has before. I left city council, went off to law school in Toronto at Osgoode Hall, briefly lived in Switzerland, went back, worked on Bay Street as a commercial lawyer for past number of years, up until I was asked to run to be the MLA for the Nanaimo Lantzville in October 2024. So put my name forward, and despite being told I was going to lose, ended up winning with 52% of the vote, which was, again, really, really humbling to have the support of my hometown. And here I am now as the MLA Parliamentary Secretary for Transit and Deputy Chair Committee of the Whole, one of the 4 presiding officers for the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much for your answer. And we'll definitely be diving into your inspiring background later on. But for now, we have our second question, which comes in 2 parts. So firstly, we're wondering, what do you think are the most pressing problems concerning youth in BC as a whole? And secondly, what do you think are the most paramount issues for youth in your own constituency?
Well, I still see myself as a young person, but that being said, for youth generally, I'd say one of the biggest things that is facing them is affordability. Tuition is really high, the cost of food is high, and rents, for example. Like when I was a city councillor, the average housing price was $310,000, and in my riding now, it's about $890,000. And so I'd say that's a big thing. And also another thing that I'd highlight is environmental issues. When I was a kid, there were never heat domes. And when I was valedictorian, both in high school and university, I said, we don't inherit the earth from our parents, but we borrow it from our grandchildren. And I think we need to make sure that we are taking care of the environment in a way that ensures that future generations are able to have the same type of opportunities that we have. And that's one of the reasons why I'm proud to be part of this government, which has been building more housing than ever, investing in infrastructure, and just trying to make life better for everyday people.
Yeah, thank you so much for your answer. And if we could just talk a little bit more about, climate resilience and climate change. We actually know that you, alongside MLAs from Ladysmith and Cowichan Valley, I think, have been advancing climate resilience projects to better prepare communities for disaster. And if you're comfortable, we would love if you could share a little bit more about this work.
Again, from a young age, I have been trying to incorporate environmentalism into every discussion that we have, because if we don't deal with ensuring that we have clean water, that sea levels are not rising at the rate that they are, that fires are not as continuous as they are, none of us will have a planet to live on. Because people can talk about endless economic growth, but there are no jobs on a dead planet. And so my hope is that when I go to city council, for example, when I mentioned that garbage incinerator that 8 of my colleagues thought would be a good idea, was they thought we should ship garbage from Vancouver to Nanaimo and burn it in Nanaimo. And Metro Vancouver had not even hit what environmental scientists said you need to reach like 90% diversion before you even consider that. And so standing up and saying like this, we need to be making long-term decisions that are well outside of 4-year election cycles, because we have a duty to the generation that comes after us to be able to have the same opportunities. And so that's why with our government, we've pushed forward Clean Energy BC. I spoke in the legislature about how we should be supporting the hydrogen industry. What comes out of a tailpipe of a hydrogen car? Water. When we can use things like that, we can actually better protect our environment. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
For sure.
For sure. Yeah, we completely agree about the idea of the environment being a prerequisite for like any project in the future. So thank you for that. The next thing that we'd sort of love to touch on is something you mentioned in your introduction, which is your role as a parliamentary secretary for transit. And we know that even before joining the legislature, you are deeply engaged in transit issues overall, especially as a Nanaimo City Councilor, where you helped pass Nanaimo's first transportation master plan, as you said, to improve bike lane sustainability and a citywide mobility. And one specific facet that we know you've been such a vocal advocate for is a more resilient port strategy for BC, recognizing that BC's marine sector contributes over, I think, more than $7 billion to our economy and plays such a critical role in job and expanding trade markets worldwide. So our question is, what are your hopes for the future of BC ports, and what changes or investments do you believe are most needed right now?
Well, I'm going to answer that question in a second, but to go back briefly, I think that transit and transportation is an equalizer. I'm a big believer in equal opportunity. And when we invest in transit, we make it easier for people to get around their communities. When I was bringing up our transportation master plan, the previous chair had never been on a bus before.
Wow.
And so, yes, exactly. And the plan was to just build more roads. And I said, no, what we need to do is we need to focus on the individual. Because you are a pedestrian before you get in your car, you're a pedestrian before you get on a bus, you're a pedestrian before you get on a bike. And so if we can build communities in which people are able to walk to and from work, go to a park, go and do the things that they enjoy, we're helping the environment, and we're actually creating healthier communities as well, and more sustainable communities. And that's, again, I'm part of a government that has the largest capital planning project in British Columbia's history, and we're building sky trains and connecting communities. And that's what we should be doing. To talk about ports, and you can't see them right now, but I am also wearing my TransLink socks because I'm a big fan of TransLink. But that being said, when it comes to our ports, back in, I think it was February or March, I gave a 2-minute statement in the legislature talking about why I thought we should be developing a port strategy for British Columbia. British Columbia has the strongest ports in Canada. If you look to Vancouver, it's the strongest port in all of Canada. Prince Rupert, there's so many opportunities for things such as short sea shipping. Back in 2021, the Coquihalla was shut down. There was no trade happening between Vancouver and the rest of Canada and British Columbia. We could have had, based off our strategy, have things going back and forth between Vancouver Fraser Port Authority and Prince Rupert. we're talking about climate change. Prince Rupert is 4 days, or sorry, yes, 4 days closer to Asia Pacific.
Wow.
The amount of fuel that would be saved, jobs in port logistics that pay very, very well, and also support good union jobs as well with longshoremen as well. So when I think about bringing together a port strategy, I think there's great opportunity to connect uh, ports in Port Alberni, the Port of Nanaimo, Port of Prince Rupert, and the Vancouver Fraser Port Authority to be able to have a better comprehensive plan of how we connect our goods and move things around our province. Also, there's an opportunity to get more trucks off the road by ensuring that our rail systems are up to the standard of being able to ensure that goods are moving in the most efficient way. Because one of the things that makes a very successful port, and you can look to ports across the world, is that they're connected to rail. And so
Right.
there's a lot of economic opportunities to help make British Columbia the economic engine of British Columbia. And I think our ports are one of the keys to unlocking that potential.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your answer. And now we're going to shift a little bit away from transport into the wonderful things you've done as an amazing advocate. We know as one of four Black MLAs in British Columbia history, and one of the first in 3 decades, you've been a trailblazing advocate for the revitalization of African Canadian culture, whether it be championing Hogan's Alley to amplifying stories of Black Canadians who have helped shape this province and Canada's history altogether. And so we're wondering, what does this milestone mean to you personally? And how do you see cultural preservation playing a role in the broader conversations about equity and inclusion in BC today?
No, again, I walk in the footsteps of giants, Emery Barnes and Rosemary Brown, the first two Black elected officials who really fought to create a world that was more equitable for everyone. British Columbia that was more equitable, and Rosemary Brown went on to become a member of Parliament.
Wow.
Um, for myself, that has been a really big focus for me. When I was elected as a city councillor, I wanted to ensure that the voices of underrepresented people were part of the decision-making process. And that didn't just mean based off their skin tone, but it meant that whether you had challenges in the socioeconomic demographic, whether you were part of the LGBTQ community, whether you were of a different ethnicity, that you or we make better decisions when we have diverse voices at the table. And so for myself, it was quite that I'm feeling those feelings right now after the election results had been released in October of 2024. But recognizing that I have a tremendous responsibility to make sure that I do good work to represent these kind of values in the legislature. And my hope is that we continue to build upon ensuring that there are more diverse people in the legislature. We're very fortunate right now that we have 52% of women in the legislature right now. We have more people of color in the legislature than ever, and I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic that we're going to make better decisions as a result of that.
Wonderful. And just talking a little bit more about your wonderful background, as you probably know, this podcast is made by and for the youth. And what we always try to do, but rarely get the opportunity to, is spotlight young leaders in government. And I would say you are a living embodiment of youth empowerment in action, whether it be having served as a Nanaimo City Councillor and a director on the regional district of Nanaimo Board, all while being elected, as he said, at just 20 years old and while still being in university. It goes without saying how inspiring and how incredible this truly is. And we'd love to hear a little bit more about your journey. What motivated you to run at such a young age? Were there any challenges or tribulations that you faced along the way? And how did you deal with them?
Yeah. Um, so again, I've had a long history of volunteerism, and I've always wanted to try to help make my community a better place. One thing my parents instilled in me at a young age was that nobody gets ahead without the help of others. And so my hope was to be able to do that. And part of what actually compelled me to run as a city councilor was I looked at transit issues and I'm like, we have a terrible transit system in Nanaimo. It needs to be better. And when I started to think about our official community plan as well, no one had ever asked me, no one had ever asked my family, no one had asked any of my friends, how can we have an official community plan where there are a number of stakeholders who aren't included in that conversation? And so for me, it was about bringing various voices to the table. And that was one of the reasons why it may not be special now, but in that period of time when I was a city councilor, bringing forward an electronic town hall, which used um, X, now formerly known as Twitter. Worst name change since, yeah, anyway. Also Facebook. All different methods so that, for example, the parent who's at home with their kids could actually participate in the council meeting. And what we heard from that process was that people actually wanted to see us spend more on infrastructure. They wanted to see us buy more parkland versus the conversations of people at our council meetings that were saying taxes were too high and we needed to cut spending. So again, we ended up getting a broader section of people and young people participated. We saw young people ending up coming to our committee meetings. Um,
Wow.
and I have to say, again, when I saw the opportunity, when saw the invitation to be on this show, I was like, this is great. I'm gonna do what I can to make the time. It took a little longer than
Yeah.
expected, but
Thank you so much.
um, but young people are often the ones who are driving the big, significant changes that we need in society, um, from inequality to climate change. These are big topics that require courage that are outside four-year mandate, and also you're going to have to live with the consequences of the decisions that are made. And so that's why I'm a big supporter of young people, especially getting engaged in the political process or just in their communities, because your voices need to be part of that process.
For sure. We completely agree. And thank you so much for that answer. And I think that perfectly segues us into the next part of our interview, which is going to focus a lot more on youth. So, continue on the subject of engagement and youth overall. We know, unfortunately, in the past couple of years, there has been quite a significant drop in youth engagement levels, just evidenced by the low youth voter turnout rates across elections, and just less youth coming up and representing themselves and saying what they truly believe in. So, in your opinion, in what aspects can the youth become more engaged within the political sphere?
Well, I think first off, we need to meet people where they're at. We can't just have this expectation that people are supposed to show up to us. I often am going to schools and speaking to people there. I had a town hall at Dover Bay Secondary where it was just a free for all. People asked difficult questions, and I gave the best response that I could. Um, I think that people should really look at getting involved in their communities. And volunteerism doesn't have to be just in the political sphere. Like I play five different instruments. There's my fun fact, by the way. Um,
Thank
but
you.
helping another student to learn how to play an instrument, or helping an illiterate adult with their reading and literacy skills. Something that I think perhaps a lot of people would look at Canada. I used to be the president of Literacy Central Vancouver Island,
Wow.
which was really focused on trying to increase literacy with adults, children, Indigenous communities, financial literacy. But if I was to ask you a question, I know this deviates just a little bit from our question about how to get young people involved, but what would you think that Canada's literacy rate is?
I think it's been dropping quite heavily. Like, is it like
And
40,
literacy is being able to pick up a newspaper, read it, and recite back what you understood.
like maybe 40, 50%?
Oh wow, okay. You see, youth are have their hand on the pulse. It is 49% of Canadians are unable to read at a high school level, and high school
Wow.
level again is picking up a newspaper grade 11. So when I heard about that, I was like, that is really shocking, and we need to do
Wow.
better. And so young people have lots of avenues, whether it's environmentalism, politics, getting involved with city, local governments, They can get involved with the provincial government, federal government. For example, myself, right now, I'm in the process of developing a youth advisory council so that I can hear directly from youth. I actually started one when I was a city councilor as well. Originally, the mayor wanted to call it the Mayor's Advisory Council. I'm like, no, it should be called the Nanaimo Youth Advisory Council because it is about Nanaimo resident and Nanaimo youth. But again, reaching out, doing exactly what you've done, which is reach out to elected officials across the country and say, hey, what can we do to get involved? How can we ensure that our voice is heard?
For sure. And just in regards to that, what are your thoughts regarding extending the voting age to 16? Do you believe by doing so, it could potentially boost a voter turnout and help place youth voices at the forefront of political discourse?
Yeah, well, there has been lots of discussion about youth participation and the democratic system. I sit as a member of the Standing Committee for Special Committee on Democratic and Electoral Reform, which we've just had a bunch of public hearings meeting with various groups. And that topic came up multiple times from different stakeholders, both young and older. I don't want to tell you what my personal view is on that right now, just because we're continuing to go through that process and engage with Colombians. But what I would say is when we give young people the opportunity to participate, that's a good thing. Young people like myself, I had my first job when I was 14 as a sandwich artist.
Wow.
Way soup and sandwiches, just so you're aware. I wasn't just making art out of sandwiches, but I was paying taxes at that point. Should people who are paying taxes being able to get their driver's licenses, sign up to be involved with the reserves, and engage in all other aspects of day-to-day life, should they also have the opportunity to voice their opinion at the polls? I think those are all questions that we should seriously consider.
Cool. And now we're on to our final and I would say hardest question of the entire interview. And you actually guessed it. It was actually on your ability to play 5 different instruments. We know you saxophonist, you're a pianist among so many other ones. But if you could only keep playing one of these instruments for the rest of your life, which one would you choose?
Can I pick 2?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, you're very kind. There's 2 of you, so
there we go.
It would be alto sax and piano,
Mhm.
I think. Oh, that's hard because I played with the York University Wind Symphony, but I played tuba in that, and that was
Wow.
yeah. That's a very hard. I think it would be piano overall if I had to choose one, just because you can play both bass line and the treble clef, so you get both hands going, and it's a more versatile instrument. But one of the things that someone told me at a competition many, many years ago when I was in high school is the tuba fills in the space that is missing in a group. So it helps sound more fuller. And when you have a really fun bass line to play, which doesn't often happen for bass instruments, it can be a lot of fun. So sorry, I didn't give you the best answer, but
No, it was all good. That was great. Yeah. And it's really just really impressive that you actually know how to play 5 instruments. Jerry and I are struggling to learn even one. So really huge congratulations to you.
Thank you.
All right. I think that concludes our interview today. Again, Jerry and I would like to extend such a big thank you to MLA Anderson and also his phenomenal team for this amazing opportunity and taking the time, as we know, out of his very, very busy schedule to come here and sit down and actually meet and speak with us today. We truly, truly appreciate it. And for all the listeners and viewers at home, if you guys wish to see more interviews like this, be sure to tune in to future episodes. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you guys next week.